So in order to do the proof of quotient rule, you have to know that the derivative of f of x is the limit as h approaches 0, f of x plus h minus f of x over h. So when you're finding the quotient rule, which is just f of x times g of x, and you're trying to find the derivative of that, you plug it into the equation and you get the limit as h approaches 0, f of x plus h over g of x plus h minus f of x over g of x all over h. So you combine like terms and you multiply by g of x and you multiply by g of x plus h, and you get limit as h approaches 0, f of x plus h times g of x minus f of x times g of x plus h over g of x plus h times g of x. So what you can take out the g of x plus h times g of x by using the limit rule, and you get limit as h approaches 0, 1 over x, 1 over g of x plus h times g of x, and once you plug in 0 to h, you get 1 over g of x squared, and I'll save that for later and add a multiply sign so that I don't forget. And the other term is limit as h approaches 0 is f of x plus h times g of x minus f of x times g of x plus h over x. So over here you can't really do much, so the only thing you can do is add f of x times g of x minus f of x times g of x, which doesn't change the equation at all. All it does is just add another element so that you can simplify further. So what you do is you get like terms, and you can factor out the g of x, which would be g of x times f of x plus h minus f of x minus f of x times g of x plus h minus g of x, and you're factoring out f of x for these two terms all over h, and use the limit rule again, and you get limit as h approaches 0 is f of x plus h minus f of x over h minus limit as h approaches 0, g of x plus h minus g of x over h. And notice that you can pull out the f of x and the g of x to the front because they don't have a h variable, so you can just pull it out. That's another rule with limits. And after you do that, you can notice that these two terms are actually the definition of a derivative. So that turns into g of x times f prime of x minus f of x times g prime of x. And don't forget that you need to add g of x squared, and there you go.